So we're going to have this great panel, international companies talking about international cross-border payments. So we have Tony from PayU. We have Oskar from Rakuten, Japanese company. And we have Faheem from Kingun.
Kingun.
All right. So gentlemen, what I'll first ask you to do is give us a quick 30-second introduction to your companies.
Sure. So my name is Oskar. I'm the managing partner of Rakuten Capital. It's a corporate venture capital at Rakuten, a large international Japanese e-commerce giant and financial services firm.
Hello, my name is Tony. I'm working for PayU, which is part of the Naspers group, FinTech. PayU is the #1 payments company in emerging markets. I'm responsible both for existing and new business for merchants headquartered in Europe.
Hi, my name is Faheem Bakshi, and I am representing Kingun, an online gaming marketplace for gamers. And we are an emerging marketplace where we buy and sell game keys. We have buyers and sellers all over the world.
Great. So, gentlemen, we live in a global world, despite lots of governments trying to be protectionist. Why is it still so hard to transfer money across borders?
I would say that it's not so much that it's tough; it's just expensive, which is why we have so many emerging startups right now, companies like Asimo that we're invested in, which is actually based here out in Poland, in Krakow. That's where they have their development center, facilitating much cheaper payments and disrupting banks, which are charging an average 8% commission for sending money away, which is quite a chunk.
Sure, it is indeed pretty expensive, but next to that, you also need to deal with local regulations, especially when you talk about emerging markets, whether it is India or in Mexico, Brazil, Argentina. We within PayU, we have this knowledge about the local regulations. We do have local offices. We do speak the language. So it means we're always continuously trying to find out how can we transfer or remit the funds out of these emerging markets into other countries. We're continuously in touch with our lawyers, and we also managed to find some workarounds. To give you some examples, for Booking.com and Adidas, we're processing their payments in LATAM, and successfully we can transfer the funds out of the country.
I think one of the most important reasons why we have this barrier is because of the government legislation. So the government is trying to, sometimes block the money to go outside the country, and we try to make sure we have the customers who are in that country to pay for the product we have. So one of the most difficult are actually the legislation, I would say.
So that's a great segue. Thank you for that. So there are capital controls in a lot of countries, China being kind of well known, but there are other countries that have this. So how do you deal with that? And I mean, how do you, if folks are starting companies here related to payments, related to FinTech, and have to deal with this challenge, how have you been able to overcome it?
Like from my perspective, an example is because we have approached, we are an online gaming marketplace, so we have e-commerce, we have these customers who would like to pay for us. For example, a Chinese customer would like to pay for a product in Europe, and we approach payment providers like PayU who actually can help us. Not in China, for example, in India, they definitely help us in doing that. In the different legislation, there are different workarounds to do that, but it is possible. But still, we have barriers. That's why we have lower conversion from those regions.
It sounds like the $1 million question. How can you get, or how can you expand merchants, for example, based in the US or in Europe, into these emerging markets, whether you talk about India, Brazil, Russia, without having a local entity, because that's the challenging thing. What you see in practice is that most of these merchants, especially startups, they're not really willing to set up a local entity because of the costs involved, resources, etc., and of course also the knowledge. So there's exactly where we step in, because we do know how the local payment landscape looks like, and we also know the local regulations, and often also the changing local regulations. So to give you an example, we're currently working also with Inditex, the parent company from Zara, and we are trying to get them in India, and we're already integrating them on our global hub.
Very good.
One thing maybe also to add, Finding a workaround is always challenging in these countries. And when you talk about India, for example, we managed to partner with some specialized third parties who are able to do the repatriation of the funds.
Interesting. Any tips and tricks? Any nuance there you can share?
You want to know the secret?
Secret sauce, if you're willing to share.
I can share this with you. It's about two companies. They have multiple entities within Europe. We partner with them, so we are actually the processor of the payments, and they actually cover the remittance part. So it's really key for merchants having no local entity in India.
Gotcha. And Rakuten is all over the world.
Sure. I was actually going to also add to the thing, right, that it's not that, as we were saying, that there are restrictions per se. Some of it are macroeconomic factors, right? Or in the case of China right now, we have capital restrictions for the repatriation of capital, but that's also to do with effectively their foreign reserves, which they're trying to reinforce and also to prevent a lot of speculation. So while historically, yes, they were protecting the renminbi, part of the block that you have right now is basically to do with current times, and we'll see how long it lasts. Are there ways around it? I mean, there's no secret that actually some companies are now trying to use Bitcoin to effectively pivot around the government, right? So while you cannot officially wire money out, there is, for instance, a company that we're following quite closely, a great startup out of San Francisco called Wire spelled with a Y. And what you do is effectively in China, you're buying Bitcoin as an SME, trying to get money out, and that Bitcoin is immediately sold in another exchange in the country of destination. What does that do? Well, you haven't technically done a transfer, but what you've done is you've made an international payment from China, say, to the US, where both parties are getting money or paying money, and another party is receiving money, and you're doing this through a digital currency, and the company makes a cut. Yep. Right? So will there be a clampdown from the government at some point? Yeah, there could be. So
can they control it? I mean, so that's a great segue towards cryptocurrencies and their importance as a backbone for some of the international money flow. Do you think that there's a way to regulate it, and some of these protectionist governments will be able to do that?
Well, I mean, effectively, if you think about it, right? So based on the whole Bitcoin philosophy or the libertarian ideal whereby everything should be anonymous, very much like cash. Effectively, the biggest use that Bitcoin has been for criminals, or one specific business called Silk Road, which effectively facilitated the peddling of weapons, drugs, etc. There's no consumer case per se, and there are countries like Japan which are effectively regulating Bitcoin right now through the FSA, and supposedly this is getting quite a bit of attention. Now, is this in line with what the technologists had in mind? I don't really think so. Will it have much of a user case? I think it remains to be seen.
I would like to add a point. When we talk about Bitcoins, it's more about B2B transactions. So the end users, for example, a gamer or someone who wants to purchase one product, it's difficult for them to create a Bitcoin account. And secondly, even if we have a local payment, for example, in China, the government would like to have us to change some policies within the website or remove some products. And that makes us very difficult to do those transactions.
Yeah, and has PayU figured out how to deal with Bitcoin?
Well, actually, to be honest, Bitcoin is for us less interesting. When you look at the characteristics of these emerging markets where we are operating in, it's much more about alternative payment methods, for example, the cash-based payment methods. Because if you would only offer credit cards, Visa, MasterCard, and so on, in these high-growth markets, you would simply miss out a significant market share. So the usage of alternative payment methods, cash-based payment methods, is very essential. Sometimes it can vary up to 30, 40, or even 60% of the market share. And that is what we are always emphasizing also toward our merchants. It is really key to understand the local payment landscape.
Yeah, I've experienced that firsthand. So, but for the backbone of your system, wouldn't it be very efficient to be able to transfer money between different entities in the background?
You mean based on these cryptograph?
On cryptocurrencies, yeah.
That would be, yeah, that would be possible. Although on the other hand, I know internally we also have different projects running, because we're also, when you look at the parent company, the Naspers Group, is also doing in paid TV. So I would say this, the connection needs to be secured. So what we do actually, we develop this in-house, these secured connections, and we actually copy it also to our payments division, which is PayU. So in that way, we already are one step ahead when you talk about security of payments.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up to the lightning round. It's a very fast session, so we have 2 minutes left. I wanted to ask each of you.
Sorry, just if I may,
Yeah.
I mean, like in the end, I mean, nothing new has been invented, right? Because people don't physically sell or send money. You're just like netting differences between subsidiaries or companies or banks,
Right?
Right. So yeah, Bitcoin kind of like allows you to do things sort of like outside of the system, but that's effectively how banks or any financial institution already operates.
Right. So I was going to ask you. Your general sense on where cross-border transactions and kind of the money flow is going, are you more positive than you were last year? Are you more negative? Are you seeing challenges ahead? What's your general outlook for each of you?
I would say definitely we are more positive because the government is understanding that we have an e-commerce, more like an e-commerce atmosphere around the world. So we definitely have positivity. Like last year, we couldn't have local payment options, for example, in China, and this year we do have it. So for us, it's definitely positive, yes.
Great.
I fully agree, because what you see in practice over time, it will become much bigger, this whole flow of cross-border traffic. Also in India, for example, when you talk about the demonetization policy, what we already seen on our platform, it's an increase, a significant increase of our volumes. And that's also what you see with our, our competitors in the market. So I strongly believe it will continue.
So positive. Do we have a consensus or do we have a negative?
I mean,
well, backstage you said we should actually spice it up a bit.
We should disagree. We should throw some furniture.
The people here are almost sleeping. Yeah.
I mean, I was just going to add that, I mean, volumes keep growing, but that, has to do effectively with the growth of the international economy. I think that the challenges ahead are whether all these nationalistic governments are going to try to bring in barriers and therefore effectively affect trade and restrict the movement of money. At the same time, yes, there are great technologies out there, although the challenge for startups specifically is to be able to make the economics work in payments. So, because the margins are so slim, you effectively need huge volumes, and not everybody can get there. And frankly, as we look at, dozens of companies every month in the space, there's very little differentiation.
Yep.
That's like the biggest challenge. Who's going to invent the best big new thing?
So 2 positives, actually 3rd positive, because for VCs, challenges are good, right? So 3 positives on that positive note. We'll thank you very much and move on to the next panel. Thank you.
Thank you,
gentlemen.
Thank you very much.